Troy Allen here with Military Mortgage Boot Camp, coming at you with the first Realtor Recon video of 2018. In today's Realtor Recon video, we're going to dispel myth number 4, which is that VA appraisals are tougher than conventional and FHA appraisals. This is probably one of the biggest misconceptions about the VA loan program that's out there. Before I get to that though, I want to review the myths that we've dispelled up to this point. Myth number 1 being that the VA buyer is a weak buyer. In that video, I told you how the average VA buyer has a credit score of 741. They have the average assets of $17,000, and the average VA buyer makes $73,000 a year. Folks, that is absolutely not a weak buyer. In that same video, I also talked about how the VA loan outperforms conventional loans and significantly outperforms FHA loans in terms of loan default. So not only is the VA buyer a strong buyer, the VA loan is a strong loan program. Myth number 2 that we talked about was that the VA loan was a difficult loan to underwrite. We talked about the VA 26-7, which is the Veterans Administration's lending guidelines, the Bible if you will, that all banks and lenders must underwrite to. The VA 26-7 has a significantly less amount of overlays, guidelines in comparison to FHA loans and conventional loans. The issue is each lender or bank adds their guidelines on top of the VA 26-7, and then that's where things get hairy. So in that scenario, it's easy to understand why we stress the need to be with a knowledgeable VA loan officer and a company that's very experienced in VA loans. If your expertise is insurance, for example, maybe you shouldn't be doing VA loans. The third myth that we covered was that the VA loan takes a long time to underwrite. 26 days is the average loan process for a VA loan. No different than conventional, no different than FHA. And that brings me to myth number 4, which is that the VA appraisals are tougher. Folks, an appraisal is an appraisal is an appraisal. You have what are the most recent comps. You have is the property safe, is it structurally sound, and is it sanitary? No different than conventional, no different than FHA. What happens is, a lot of times you'll get with, or the loan will get with an inexperienced VA underwriter who will inevitably underwrite the loan to FHA standards as opposed to the VA 26-7, and then that's where things get hairy. And that's another reason to stress the need to make sure that you're dealing with a reputable VA lender and dealing with a very experienced VA loan officer. Secondly, how many loan programs allow 2 additional methods to reach value? In this case, the first method is called Tidewater. If a value is going to come in low, an appraiser issues a Tidewater alert, which basically gives the real estate agent 48 hours to provide additional comps for that appraiser to reconsider value. If he still does not reach value at that point, then the buyer can initiate reconsideration of value, which is the second method. In that case, all the documents are then uploaded to the VA for them to reconsider the value. And who works at the VA? Other veterans. So in that case, you know, probably more likely to get value than not. So as with all these other myths that we've talked about, I'm going to call this myth busted. See you next time on Realtor Recon.